I'm sure it comes as no surprise to any of you, but The Doors of Stone by Patrick Rothfuss has been one of my most anticipated books of all time. I've talked about the Kingkiller Chronicle a lot on this channel, not only to help myself, but to help other Kingkiller fans who just can't seem to get this series off of their mind. And while I suspect it's still most likely a ways off before we see book 3 on the shelves, we've had a pretty exciting reveal recently. Pat Rothfuss read the prologue to The Doors of Stone, and while it may only be a page long, there's a lot of subtle information that kind of fits in with the theory that fans have had pretty much since the beginning. It was enough info to excite me again and make me want to make a new season of Kingkiller theory and lore videos on the channel, so let me know if that's something you want to see. In this video, I'll be analyzing the Doors of Stone prologue, and then I'll be going over several theories about the purpose of the Waystone Inn, mainly focusing on the idea that a trap is being set. If you somehow missed out on the news, Patrick Rothfuss made a wager during one of his Twitch streams if a certain amount was donated to his World Builders charity before he slays the Ender Dragon in Minecraft. Then he promised to read the prologue of The Doors of Stone, plus one full self-contained chapter from The Doors of Stone, and a preview from a project that he's been working on, which happens to be a comic taking place in the world of Temerant called The Boy That Loved the Moon. Yes, this is a comic about Jax, the boy who stole the moon, and I can't wait to read it. This ended up going much better than he expected, and there's now over 1 million donations to the fundraiser, and a bunch of stretch goals were added to the prize draw. And Rothfuss followed through with his promise and read the Doors of Stone prologue live in a stream, and that's what we're going to be analyzing. As for the full chapter, it looks like Rothfuss wants to get together a bunch of his voice acting friends and film sort of an audio version of it, and he said that this should drop no later than February. To show that he was serious about the bargain, he posted the first page of the comic on his blog. I'm not too sure if that was the sneak peek or if he plans on showing more of it later on. Okay, now let's analyze the prologue so that we can get to some theories. It was still night in the middle of Noir. The Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was a silence of 3 parts. The most obvious part was a vast, echoing quiet made by things that were lacking. Now, obviously, it's very similar to the prologues in the first 2 books, and even shares the same title, A Silence of 3 Parts. And leave it to Rothfuss to structure many of his sentences in 3 parts as well. Many of the phrases remain the same, with new descriptions and metaphors. But something interesting that we see right away is that there seems to be more of a focus on the town of Noir rather than Kvothe himself. The slow, dewy hush of folk walking through the grass would have brushed the silence off the front steps of houses with the indifferent briskness of an old birch broom. This prologue, in true Rothfuss fashion, feels very poetic, and I love the way it switches between hard and soft consonants. The first part doesn't really reveal information to note, it's mostly emphasizing the silence and again, the fact that there's no music at the Waystone Inn. But then after that, we get new information on what's going on in the basement of the Waystone Inn, and this is where things get interesting. In the basement of the Waystone, there was the smell of coal smoke and seared iron. Everywhere was the evidence of hurried work. Tools scattered, bottles left in disarray. A spill of acid hissed quietly to itself, having slopped over the edge of a wide stone bowl. Now, it is very odd for things to be in disarray. There's always been a big emphasis on Coates' obsession with keeping bottles neat and tidy, or wiping down counters and sweeping when it's not really needed. But in the basement, unseen from everyone above, there's tools scattered about and acid slopping over the edge of a bowl. Either somebody else is working down here, or Kvothe is making preparations for the climax of Book 3, and he knows there's a possibility that he won't be returning, so the mess doesn't matter. The description of things being in disarray is enough for us to realize that something extreme is going on. Now, it could be Bast that's making the mess, but the description of seared iron makes me think it's probably not him. We know that the Fae hate iron, and it can even hurt them, but they can withstand it if they need to. But I still doubt that Bast would be messing around with it, considering Felurian was sick for days after tinkering with it. I really don't think Chronicler would be in the basement, so I think it's clearly Kvothe's doing, and it fits in with his skill sets. Nearby, the bricks of a tiny forge made small, sweet pinging noises as they cooled. These tiny, forgotten noises added a furtive silence to the larger, echoing one. They bound it together like tiny stitches of bright brass thread. The low drumming counterpoint to the tabor beats behind the song. So there's also a forge, which could indicate sigildry. Could it be that Kvothe is down here trying to open up the thrice-locked chest? Take into consideration the mention of acid, since there was a conversation in the books previously where Bast suggested using acid to get into the thrice-locked chest. So here we see Kvothe could be trying that. And maybe sigildry is needed to open one of the locks. Now there's a few metals in the Kingkiller Chronicle that are described to have special properties. For instance, in the crockery, we see copper doors and window frames, and even copper web in the walls. Considering the rooms are meant to be keeping namers from escaping, it's pretty clear that copper is a weakness against namers. The Amir had copper shields. Also, Rothfuss has mentioned that a copper sword would be good against a namer. So you can pretty much consider it canon that copper is a namer's kryptonite. The thrice-locked chest has a lock of iron, one of copper, and one that is unseen. Now iron protects against Fae, or at least discourages them, and copper protects against naming. The third lock is more interesting, a lock that is unseen. Now it's possible this lock is silver, and maybe it's unseen because you need to open the other locks first. This would fit in with Taborlin the Great having a iron, silver, and copper penny. But I think it's likely the unseen lock is more magical in nature and is the one that's giving Kvothe a hard time. Now we should also take note of the mention of brass thread. This reminds me of the copper web in the crockery, and brass is an alloy of copper and zinc, so it's an interesting metal to bring up. Master Loren has a brass plate on his door. In the Wise Men's Fear, we see Kvothe orders 3 brass-bound barrels for the inn, which are most likely to accommodate Bast by not using iron. In the Slow Regard of Silent Things, Ari has a gear made from brass. Also something noteworthy, in Book 2, Denna specifically doesn't want brass on Kvothe's loot case. Maybe this is because brass has some sort of magical property that dampens the effects of music. Or rather, a type of magic that involves music. It's been strongly hinted at throughout the books that music has its own sort of magic, and we know that music is part of what Kvothe lost. We also know there's a group called the Singers, and it's possible they know the secrets of this magic. Perhaps the unseen lock on the thrice-locked chest is in need of some sort of musical key. The third silence was not an easy thing to notice. If you listened long enough, you might be able to feel it in the chill copper of the Waystone's locks, turned tight to keep the night at bay. It lurked in the thick timbers of the door and nestled deep in the building's gray foundation stones, and it was in the hands of the man who designed the inn as he slowly undressed himself beside a bare and narrow bed. The man had true red hair, red as flame. His eyes were dark and weary, and he moved with the slow care of a man who was badly hurt, or tired, or old beyond his years. The Waystone was his, just as the third silence was his. The end of the prologue explains the third silence, and again, there's so much info in this small section. The Waystone Inn has copper locks to protect against namers, or to keep naming from working within the inn. It's also revealed that the inn is built on gray foundation stones, and Kvothe didn't simply buy the inn, he's the one who designed it. These stones are without a doubt the same gray stones found all throughout Temerant, known by the Ademaru as a symbol for good luck and also said to be gateways to the Fey realm. And from chapter 1 of The Name of the Wind, we can now gather that the fireplace would also be made from this same stone, and this one happens to be standing. There's literally a standing Waystone in the Waystone Inn. Now when this innkeeper is described as being badly hurt, tired, or old beyond his years, I'm pretty sure it's likely all of the above. And of course, the prologue ends with the iconic line, "It was the patient, cut-flower sound of a man who was waiting to die." So what is he preparing the inn for? Why has it been built to protect against namers? And what purpose do the gray stones serve? He's definitely put a lot of thought into the design, but to what end? Well, it's about time we dive into some theories. Okay, so we have a few theories to go over here, and I'll be saving my favorite one for last. We've seen that Kvothe has been very specific about the design of the Waystone Inn, even from the very beginning of Book 1 with the fireplace and the mounting board made from roa wood that's used to hang folly. A sword that possibly could have been taken from Cinder. Both swords are described to be very similar. Now it could be that Kvothe is playing a beautiful game and setting a trap at the Waystone. Maybe by the end of day 3, after his story is told and he's mentioned all the Chandrian names to the chronicler a handful of times, they'll arrive at the inn to confront him. He'll break open the thrice-locked chest and regain his true name and powers. And to finally claim vengeance on the lives of his family and troop, he'll sacrifice his own life to kill all the Chandrian in one spot. After all, we know that this story is a tragedy. Theory number 2. Eax, also known as Jax, is a powerful shaper who pulled the moon into the Fey realm, which sparked the Creation War. And it's said that he's now shut beyond the doors of stone. Now in Book 3, Kvothe will set Eax free from his prison beyond the doors of stone, or the four-play door of the university. I'd recommend watching my theory video on what's behind the four-play door if you haven't yet. Setting Eax free has messed up everything in the present day, which is why there's now skin dancers and Skrael on the loose. Kvothe will lure Eax to the inn, possibly by using the piece of the moon that's sealed away in the lockless box. At the inn, he'll utilize everything that he's set in place, even using the gray stones in the foundation to turn the entire inn into a gateway to the Fey realm to trap Eax there. I mean, the inn is called the Waystone, and it's made from Waystone, so maybe its purpose is to act like one, and be a literal gateway to the Fey. Now, I've also seen some theories on Reddit that the chronicler is not who he says he is, and that his identity could actually be Eax himself or one of the Chandrian. I'm not sure if I fall for that one, but I think it's really interesting. Stemming off from this theory, there's the idea that the Chandrian are not as terrible as the stories make them out to be, and Kvothe eventually becomes something of a Chandrian himself, with silence being his sign. Maybe after killing Cinder, he needs to take Cinder's place. He'll need to work with the Chandrian to contain Eax or destroy him, and end the curse that's been put upon them. I know that one's a little out there. It would be a big twist for him to be working with the Chandrian, but it's a fun theory. Theory number 3. Now, this was my first thoughts after reading the prologue, and honestly, I think I sort of buy this theory the most. It all just kinda makes sense. Now, I wanted to see if anyone else had the same thoughts after reading the prologue, and found this post by Reddit user NoAlbatross8767, which I'll link in the description. The room that Kvothe enters in the crockery has walls and ceilings made from gray stone. It has a copper door and window frames, and there's something strange about the air, almost like it's soundproofed. This sounds very similar to the information we have about the Waystone Inn, but the strange thing in the air here is the third silence. He's designed the Waystone Inn to be like one of the rooms in the crockery. Kvothe is not trying to keep something out, he's trying to keep himself in. He's built a place that can limit his naming abilities, and maybe even his other abilities. Now, this could possibly explain why he was able to fight Skrael outside of the inn but lost to bandits while inside. His powers are dampened. This would also explain why he can't unlock the chest if his powers are limited inside the Waystone. He could be using the inn as a way to mask his powers from the Chandrian or some other group that's after him. I'm guessing that in Book 3, he maybe loses control and hurts somebody that he loves, maybe Simon or Denna. And he decides to design a place to keep his abilities in check so he won't do it again. And I think a lot of this comes back to the curse of the Kvothe. The Kvothe is responsible for many of history's greatest tragedies. It's believed to have spoken to Jax before he stole the moon, and to Lanray before the fall of Mir Terinial. We know that in the present day, Kvothe has caused a lot of the world's problems. I think he's finally realized how dangerous it is that someone as hot-headed and at times thoughtless as he is can be such a danger to the world. So he's found a way to make a prison to contain himself. This lines up with the cut flower sound of a man waiting to die. He's cut off from his powers and waiting to die so that he'll no longer be a danger to the world after speaking to the Kvothe. Either that, or he actually is stuck in a room in the crockery, and he's been imagining this entire story. The town of Noir is nowhere on the map. So what if it's all just the hallucinations of a madman? Let me know what you thought about the prologue for the Doors of Stone, and what you think of these theories, if you think any of them are plausible. Join the Discord server if you want to talk about fantasy books with an awesome community. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more Kingkiller videos, and a big thank you to all you guys over on Patreon.